Hello everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Dr. Steve Simpson, and as you might know, I worked as a medical doctor until 10 years ago, but since then I have been working exclusively as a mind coach for elite performers. And those are people just like you. So if you think you're in the wrong place, you're definitely not. So what have we got on the show today? Well, we're going to talk about dreams and how they might be able to help you. And I've got 3 questions in the bank as well. And then I'll finish by just giving you a few details of what might be on the show next week. So I'll just start by briefly recapping. We've been on a bit of a journey. First of all, I'll say when I work with my clients, sooner or later there comes a point when they're stuck. They either want to move away from something in the past that is inhibiting their performance in some way, or they are not happy with where they are in the moment and they want to move towards something in their life that they want, often very badly indeed. And that can get really as complicated as you like or as simple as you like. And as you know, I try and keep things as simple as I possibly can. And when you're talking about the brain, that's quite a challenge. But anyway, I would say to these people, okay, let's go back to mind, body, and soul. Because if you, me, can hit that sweet spot of a perfect balance of mind, body, and soul, then we are going to turn in a performance at whatever we're doing very much higher than our current level. That's why, this is why the potential of the unconscious mind is so vast and often so untapped. So we haven't really talked very much about the body, and we may or may not in the future. We've talked a little bit about the soul, or what people can call spirituality, they have other words for this, and we've certainly touched on that. And we may do a little bit today, I don't really know. But we've certainly talked a lot about the mind, and we've stressed the importance of the unconscious mind and how we are using just about a fraction of its potential, and how unfortunately we're stuck in our conscious mind with all of the overthinking and negative self-talk and all the rest of it that we live with, not 24 hours a day because we go to sleep. There we are, well, we're talking a bit more about that. But that's the only time really the conscious mind lets us get on with stuff. So the last few programs, we've talked about the unconscious mind, but more importantly, and this is the most important thing really, is how can you use this knowledge to get lucky? Because that's what this webinar channel is called. And I don't have to call it luck. I could call it success, happiness, you name it. But luck's the best word that I've found so far for explaining some of these things. So you want to get more lucky in your life. You think you deserve a bit more. Maybe you think you don't, but anyway, I think you do. So the answer is to access the unconscious mind, and one of the shows was about meditation and mindfulness, which are well-proven ways to connect a little more closely with the unconscious. The last show was about hypnosis, and there was some pretty good examples, I think, of ways that hypnosis can help you. And hypnosis is a greatly misunderstood subject, but well worthy of a little further thought. And I think it was during the preparation of the last show, it might have been prompted by a question that I had from one of you. I just realized I've never before talked to clients, as far as I can remember, or made shows or anything, about dreams. And yet, it's a very obvious connection to the unconscious mind, and something that we do every single time we go to sleep. And it's not because I'm not interested in the subject. I certainly am. In fact, I remember reading books when I was about 17 by a chap called Lobsang Rampa. And he was a Tibetan Buddhist. And his stories were all about reincarnation and astral travel. And he described astral travel as when we're sleeping, our spiritual body leaves our physical body and goes flying around the universe. And we're connected apparently to our real body by some thin invisible cord, so that we all come back to the right place. So whether that's true or not, I would have thought with 8 billion people, well, I suppose we're not all sleeping at once, let's say 3 billion people, all flying around the universe, we'd get our cords tangled up. But apparently it doesn't happen like that, fortunately. So what is the purpose of dreams? Why do we have them? As far as I can tell, most animals don't. But mammals do. We know some. I mean, if you watch a dog sleeping and it's twitching and barking in its sleep, you can see that it's chasing rabbits or something. So we're not alone, but certainly all human beings do dream. So nature would not have given our brain that function unless there was a very good reason for it. And I think the scientists agree that somehow or other, when we're asleep and that busy conscious mind is switched off and giving us all a break, the unconscious mind can work largely unfettered, and it will be processing largely the information that it's received during previous 24 hours and in some way arranging them in that filing cabinet in your brain. And stuff that it doesn't think is very important will be filed hopefully right at the back, where it's not quite forgotten, but it's certainly buried pretty deep. And the stuff that the brain thinks is important is going to be filed right up front so that you can pretty immediately access it if you need to. And herein is a great thing and also a potential problem, which I'll explain later. So that's why we're dreaming, because all this information is being sorted and we're getting the kind of the echoes or resonances of some of that processing just almost touching our conscious mind so that we can almost remember everything, but not quite. And how frustrating is that? Because our dreams typically are rather disjointed. It's hard to understand any meaning of them and hard to make sense of them. They're often very unrealistic, sometimes really bizarre, and sometimes incredibly frightening. So that's what they are, and we all do it. Apparently, if we're an average person, which of course none of us are, we dream. We have about 5 dreams a night, and they last for between 5 and 10 minutes. And that came as a bit of a surprise to me, because some of my dreams seem to go on forever, and some of them only seem to last a couple of seconds. But presumably that's because I can't remember most of what I dreamt about. So dreaming is an entry to the unconscious mind, and through the centuries, people have been fascinated by dreams. And like most things to do with the mind, there's a whole spectrum of different opinions about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing to dream, and what you do with these dreams and what you don't do with the dreams. Just to give you a very brief recap, throughout the centuries, some people have believed that dreams are a direct message from God to us, or it's a way of us connecting to God. And this can provide, as these people believe, guidance of what they should do in their lives and where they are at the moment. Other people believe that dreaming is a way of going to the other side and being able to connect to people, our ancestors, who are no longer living in this real world. And there are medicine men and shamans who take all kinds of psychedelic drugs, and they go on prolonged periods of fasting to get their heads into the place where they can dream in a semi-awake state to do all of those things that I've just described. And some people have used dreams, or believe that dreams are predictions of the future, if they can be interpreted correctly. And we've probably all heard of Nostradamus and the book of Revelations, and Revelation literally does mean to dream. So there are just a couple of very quick examples, but there are many others too. And just a bit of a synchronicity about this show. A couple of days ago, it was the 500th anniversary of a very significant event. And that was when a chap called Martin Luther went up to a church door with a hammer and a nail and a piece of paper, and he nailed this paper to the door, and on it there were 95 rules or edicts or something like that, because he was upset because the church, as it was at that time, he thought it had lost its direction and was devaluing itself and devaluing its religion. And he said this couldn't go on any longer, and things had to be simpler, and communication with God had to be more direct. Well, he got a lot of traction for all of this, and it led to a period in history, a time of upheaval called the Reformation. I remember we talked about that when I was at school, but as usual, stuff like history went straight over my head, sadly, because now I know that if we do want to see the future, one of the best ways to see it is by studying the past. Anyway, some of the people, I don't know what Martin Luther thought about dreams, but certainly some of the people who followed him did not approve of dreams at all. They said they were the work of the devil. So there's the first health and safety warning of the evening. My opinion, for what it's worth, I don't think they are at all. So let's get back onto firmer ground here, and that is the world of psychology and modern psychology. And by modern, I mean going back as far as Freud, who's a person we've mentioned before. He was fascinated by dreams. He certainly thought they were a direct connection to the unconscious mind, and he spent hours with his clients getting them to remember dreams, and he would analyze them and make what he thought was sense of them all. In fact, he called dreaming the royal road to the unconscious mind. Carl Jung had very different ideas. He, as you know, was a student of Freud's for 8 years until they split up. And he felt more that dreaming was a connection to the collective unconscious. And we've done a show about that very recently. If you didn't see it, I recommend it, because it'll help to make a bit more sense of some of the other things we've been talking about. And also a connection to the archetypes. He thought archetypes were inherited remnants of the people who've gone before us. It was very fanciful at the time, but now we know about DNA and inheritance, it's perhaps not quite so fanciful. But he felt that there were certain archetypes in every person's personality, and at any one time, one or more of these would be dominant, and that is why we would make the decisions that we do and the actions that we take. Another person who had some thoughts about dreams was Fritz Perls. Fritz Perls was the founder of Gestalt therapy. And I use little bits of it from time to time, but certainly I'm nowhere near an expert. But the theory of Gestalt is a bit similar to Jung's view of archetypes, really, that we're made up of parts, that our mind is split into certain parts, and at some time, sometimes one part will speak, other times another part will speak, and so on. And he thinks, the part, by the way, it might be something like, we've got something in our brain that's a defender or a protector of us, and all the decisions it makes are based on our protection. Another one will be the analyst, the person who analyzes all the information and draws conclusions and tells us what we have to do with it. And then, of course, there's the critic, which we all have, with its welcome messages. So Fritz Perls, he said that dreaming was really the reflection of the parts inside that felt they were being ignored and weren't being listened to. And so they were using that opportunity when the conscious mind was asleep to get their message across. And so the insights that he got from that helped him with his clients. So there you are, there's a few theories, and you all have your own and I'll have my own, but those are kind of like the best things that I can think of at the time to describe where science or psychology might be on dreams. And of course, we're learning more and more about this now that scientists can wire up our brains and measure our brain waves while we're sleeping, and even do scans while we're sleeping. They know which bits of our brain are being activated by our dreams, and they know that dreaming is directly related to REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is, imagine the dog twitching, that's his equivalent or her equivalent of rapid eye movement sleep. So, where how can we use what I've just described, and how can we use our own thoughts to make this connection to the unconscious mind and to make something of this connection? Because that, of course, is the important thing about it. Well, the problem with dreams, as I've alluded to, is that I don't think anybody, or very few people, will have a crystal clear recollection of their dreams were. So these bits of garbled video that we play or that we replay when we wake up, that's why they don't make a lot of sense. But we will have all had that moment, I imagine, usually about 3 o'clock in the morning, when we have an extremely vivid dream and it makes a lot of sense to us at the time, and we wake up and we think, I'm going to remember this till the morning, and we know what happens. We wake up in the morning, we know we had some kind of dream, can't really remember what it was about. So this is what some people do, and you may want to or not. It's up to you. But some people, when they have one of those epiphany moments at 3 o'clock in the morning, they have a pencil, a piece of paper by the side of their bed, and they write what they can remember down so that in the morning they will be able to bring it back. And one of the questions I had really is just on this subject. She was guessing what I was going to say. She must be psychic. Her name is Margaret. Hello, Margaret. And she says, how can you recall dreams? Well, I hope I've given you an idea, and there might be others. Even when you wake up in the morning, you'll remember something. And if you jot them down then, it might start to come back to you later in the day. Because just remember, in the unconscious mind, nothing's ever forgotten. So it will be there. It's just, it'll come out when it's ready. It'll probably come out, when you're having a walk or meditating or doing some of the other things that we've talked about. So that's a way of getting into dreams. And then, if we're lucky, they might make some kind of sense to us. And because it may well be a message, doesn't have to be, but it easily could be a message from the unconscious that this is something that's unresolved, which is why it's filtering up into the conscious mind. And it might be a period in your life where there is some dilemma, stuck on the horns of a dilemma. Should I do this? Should I do that? And so you might get some good information from that. Second health and safety warning. I wouldn't make any big decisions based on a dream. There have been plenty of people throughout history who have done, and they've come to a sticky end. So definitely, it's like everything else. Use the information, but put it in the context of everything else as well. Another thing is, don't forget the importance of daydreaming. Daydreaming is an altered state. It's not asleep, it's not awake, it's somewhere in between. And that's a pretty much of a sweet spot. Isaac Newton, apparently, we all know the story of him being hit on the head by an apple, and he discovered his 5 laws of motion, or whatever they are, which are still apparently valid to this day. Well, the other story that I heard about it is that he wasn't hit on the head by an apple, but he always used to sit in a chair underneath a tree and after his lunch and meditate. And he didn't want to fall asleep, so he held an apple in his hand, and then if he did fall asleep, the apple would drop and it would jerk him up and wake him up, and then, at that same time, he just might get one of these ideas. And we've talked about Einstein, and I'm sure we're going to talk about Einstein again, but he was a great believer in daydreaming, and he said he got most of his best ideas when he was daydreaming. Now, can you remember back to when you were in school and you were asked a tough question by the teacher, and you would say, and you'd stare at the ceiling, and then, the teachers that I had, they would then start shouting at me, and they would say, you won't find the answer written on the ceiling. Well, just shows how wrong they were and how right I was, although I didn't know it at the time. Because when we raise our eyes like this is really, in our brain, we are accessing the stuff that's up here, and we're trying to bring these memories back down again. And so it is with daydreaming. So I think probably that's enough. I mean, a week ago, I'd have never imagined making a show about dreams. So there we are. It's answered a few of your questions. I do have a couple more questions I will do my best to answer, and then I'll tell you what might be coming in next week's show. 2 questions from Annabelle. The first one was, which part of the brain do bad dreams come from? Well, my guess would be that it would be that deep part of the reptilian brain that we've talked about before, which is called the amygdala. Now, you don't need to try to spell it, because it'll give you a headache if you do. But the important thing to remember is that it's right deep, and it's the primitive part of our brain which has been inherited over the generations, and it keeps stuff simple. Its main job is to protect us. So if it sees something as a danger, it will draw our attention to it in the best way that it possibly can. And one way that that is done is through fear. Now, a lot of fear is inherited, and experiments have been done on babies. This sounds terribly cruel, but apparently when babies are shown pictures of snakes, they become frightened immediately. Well, they've never heard of a snake, they've never seen one, but it's something that, you know, the way trained rats pass on their training to rats that come after them all. This is the kind of DNA inheritance that the scientists do understand. So a bad dream could well be something like that. It could be the amygdala. It's been helping to sort out the events of the day, and it suddenly thinks, I am in danger. I am in danger. This is something important that I need to tell myself about right now. And because it's a simple part of the brain, it often gets things wrong. And in fact, that's why people have it's one of the reasons why people might have phobias or post-traumatic stress. It's because that events that happened to them as children, which were very important to them now, really aren't very important to them as an adult, but they still feel the same way about it. So that is where bad dreams may well come from. And Annabelle asked another question which is related. She said, why do I remember bad dreams so clearly, and why do I have a response in my body, like heart palpitations and anxiety and those kind of things? Well, the reason you have those kind of feelings is these are called physiological responses. So my guess is that it's this amygdala firing in again, because when people are frightened of a situation, it's the fight or flight reaction which we've talked about. The body releases this chemical called adrenaline and others too, which release a lot of energy in our bloodstream and prepare us for instant physical action. So that is why your heart is beating, and it's carrying on beating, because you haven't just had to run 300 yards away to summon help. You've been lying in your bed, so there's nowhere for that adrenaline to go. So it comes out in these symptoms, which can be extremely unpleasant. So hopefully all of us will not have too many bad dreams, and hopefully the worst dreams are when you're dreaming a really bad dream and you keep telling yourself, I know this is true, it isn't a dream, if you had any of those. Anyway, but fortunately, most dreams are very pleasant. So what's coming up? That's enough. What's coming up next week? I'm not exactly sure. I've talked about mind, body and soul, the trilogy, and finding the perfect sweet spot. The reason it's important is because if you do get this sweet spot, then life becomes a lot easier and it raises your performance to a much higher level. Now, even if you only get 2 of those things right, you can still do it. The trouble is, it'll be harder, it'll be more stressful, and we know that stress is dangerous for mental health and as well as physical health. And if you only get 1 of them right, you're going to find it even more difficult. So you don't need to be an expert in any of these 3 areas, but I think you need to touch these 3 bases. So I might, as an introduction to perhaps some of Einstein's views and things, the next week's show, it might be about a person called Baruch Spinoza, and he is described as the prince of philosophers. He died quite young, but he made a huge impact on people during his relatively short life. So I won't say anything more about him at the moment, and I'll say it's possible the program might change in a week. And as always, welcome your views on what you'd like to talk about. So, I hope you have a wonderful week until we next meet. I hope at least some of your nice dreams come true. I hope you find time to spend a little bit of time daydreaming, and just who knows, you may be the next Nobel Prize winner. So, on that sweet spot note, goodbye for now.